right, everybody. Welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. Today is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. Today, we're talking the Super Bowl, some news and notes from around the Detroit Lions, and discuss 5 burning questions for this Lions team as the 2026 offseason officially commences. Before we get to all that, I'm Nolan Bianchi. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Richard, we have finally ended the waiting period of the offseason and now get into the part where things are actually happening. How are you? How are you excited? What'd you think of the Super Bowl? Lots of things off the top here, but what's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I think what I'm most excited about is that it's not below zero anymore in Michigan. That it's still cold, but it's not 0 degrees like it's been. It's in the 20s and 30s and 40s now. But no, yeah, we've talked about before how me and you both
begin the show. I like it.
We've talked about before how me and you both lament the off season, and we thoroughly enjoy covering the team in season. But there are the high points of the off season, and you're right that they are coming up. I can't believe that in less than 2 weeks we'll be at the combine. There will be and there while we're at the combine, covering the combine, talking to prospects and whatnot, there will be agents and teams laying the groundwork for some free agent deals that'll come in the weeks after that. So it is an exciting time.
Now, I, like you mentioned just now, I hate the cold weather. I always hated the cold weather. I was born and raised in Michigan. Hated it. But I actually just found a little bit of I don't know what the right word is, solitude, something related to that word, perhaps, where I just found out about this awesome pond hockey group in Detroit that shovels off Belle Isle, and I had the time of my life. I played the Sunday before the Super Bowl, and I was like, this is the most fun I've ever had in my life. I can't believe I've just been sitting inside on the weekends, too cold. And then I got sick last week, so then I couldn't go. And on Sunday, I thought I was going to have the best Sunday of all time. Pond hockey for 4 hours in the morning, then Super Bowl at night. That did not happen because I was sick. And now it's above 32. And I think this is the first time in my life I've ever been disappointed about seeing the temperature rise. So unfortunate timing for me to discover this and have a renewed appreciation for cold weather because it's over now. I didn't even get to enjoy it except for that one time.
Yeah, that's funny. I saw you and Birchie out there. By the way, this is the guy that will play hockey but won't play basketball with me or anything like that when I ask him.
Because you aren't okay with just shooting hoops and stuff like that. You're like, yo, we gotta run fives and let's make it serious. Everybody take this seriously. We're gonna be running plays. You're gonna have to
running plays. I told you that you can go sit in the corner and I'll feed Ben Raven in the post. We talked.
I even explained to Will Birchfield, who I was playing with last Sunday. I was like, I haven't played hockey in a long time, so this is a perfect reintroduction to the sport because the rink is so small that I can somewhat handle it, but if you take me out to a big rink, you take me out to that deep water, start to drown a little bit, and then that's to me what I'm worried about with basketball. I'll go shoot some hoops, play around. In the NFL, this is a great trait. You always want to compete, and sometimes it's just I just want to shoot some hoops.
Take you out to the deep.
So it's hard to do those things with you because we just want to get different things out of it.
Anyway, take you out to the deep dark abyss.
Yeah. All right, we should probably talk about the Super Bowl here on the Gridiron Gang podcast. It was not a very entertaining Super Bowl. Let's get that right off the top. Now, just hopefully they'll eventually move these Super Bowls into dome stadiums only because that game was pretty much unwatchable for most of it.
That is, and that is such a disingenuous argument.
Man, I'm king of the disingenuity. No, the New England Patriots offense was not good. I mean, they were just overmatched from start to finish, and I hate to take credit away from the Patriots after this wonderful season that they had. Nobody thought they'd be here. But the circumstances in which they moved through the playoffs was a little bit questionable. We were wondering how it would hold up when they had to play a really good team like the Seattle Seahawks. I will say, I think the MVP voters got it right. Matthew Stafford being named MVP last Thursday night. He ends up that shootout that he had against Sam Darnold in the NFC Championship really turned out to be essentially the de facto Super Bowl because I don't think the Patriots would have been either of those teams. and we saw how Drake May performed versus Matthew Stafford. But I think the biggest thing was just that Seahawks defense was making life really, really, really hard on him. So as much as Drake May couldn't maybe get out of his own way, that interception late was really, really bad. I also just think that the Seahawks had them in hell, like plain and simple, and they couldn't protect. He had no idea where the blitzes were coming from. He was literally seeing ghosts, we saw like that clip of Sam Darnold against the Patriots all those years ago. And I don't really think any differently of Drake May after this game, but I mean, that Seahawks defense is one of the more impressive units that we've seen in a long time. But at the same time, isn't this kind of the takeaway from every Super Bowl? Like when the Eagles win, and even when the Chiefs have won in recent years, it's like, yeah, Mahomes and Kelsey and all that, but more importantly, Steve Spagnuolo and that defense have been
Chris
showing
Jones,
up.
Karlaftis.
And that is the story of every Super Bowl, I feel. Whereas like offenses do what they're supposed to do, and then one defense like just completely wrecks the game plan of the other. Maybe it's recency bias, but I do feel like that whichever team plays better defense. This is a hilarious statement. Whichever team plays better is going to win the game. But no, it's usually it does feel like whichever team has the better defense typically wins these Super Bowls.
And I think last year was the most biggest prime example of that, where Fangio's Eagles they had a 0% blitz rate. They just rushed forward the entire game, and they still pressured Mahomes on whatever it was. It was like 35-40% of his dropbacks, sacked him a bunch, and just blew the game up. I was going to bring up when you were talking about the quarterbacks. Did you see the clip from Julian Love, the safety for the Seahawks, when he was mic'd up, where he was talking about how that when May got to the final step in his drop, that he wasn't just foot down firing the ball. It was foot down, wait a second, confirm that the guy's open, and then throw the ball. And Love literally says on the sideline in the mic'd up clip, he goes, he's not doing it like Stafford. And I was like, man, like that's a brutal clip for May and for Patriots fans. But to your point about the defense, yeah, I mean, and I think this dovetails into the Lions discussion, if there's any Lions discussion to be had about what can be learned from the Super Bowl and applied to Detroit, is the front four pass rush. And we talked about it last year. We'll talk about it this year, and we'll talk about it until it's not. I don't even want to call it a problem, because I wouldn't call the pass rush this year for the Lions like the chief problem for why they missed the playoffs. But I don't think it wasn't a catalyst for success. I think it was a fine pass rush, and you can look at the pressures, the raw pressure numbers. You can look at the sack numbers. My pushback to you was it would be one, a higher than usual rate of their sacks came from non-defensive linemen. Jack Campbell had 5. Derek Barnes had 4. I think Anzalone had 1.5. Branch had 2 before he got hurt. So a ton came from that. And then secondly, and this is kind of on one hand, a bad argument because Aleem only played half the season, but they did not have a third notable option rushing the passer. It was Hutch and it was Al-Quadin Muhammad as your pass rush specialist on third downs. And nobody else, according to PFF, had more than 25 pressures on the season. I think it was only 2 teams that did that this year, the Lions, and forgive me for not remembering the other team.
You're talking D lineman.
D lineman, yes. That D lineman. Well, no, it was another defender. It was 2 teams in the NFL did not have a third defender with at least 25 pressures.
Like Jack didn't have 25 pressures?
No, I think Barnes. I want to say Barnes was.
Okay.
I'll check
my bad.
Right now.
Misunderstood.
But my larger point is, they didn't have a third option. Yeah, Aleem was 23 pressures. Barnes was 21. Those were your third and fourth. You just didn't have a good enough third option, and I think that is something that should be addressed this offseason.
Yeah, and again, like I don't know if there's anything that can be learned from that, but to your point, and that was kind of my whole takeaway from the day after, was how many times did like the Seahawks offense didn't need to do anything. Like they were going to win that game by virtue of the situations that their defense put them in.
And you're fine. And you kind of like felt that probably like 8 minutes into the game. It did not take long to realize like, okay, as long as the Seahawks offense doesn't screw this up, they're going to win.
Yeah. And again, that is a feeling that I very, very rarely have on following a Lions win, of like defense won them this game. Or, I think back to that Philly game. Like, that's maybe the best case scenario where it's like defense held them in it in a 7-point loss. And I think that's the thing that frustrates a lot of Lions fans. And that's the thing that like gives me pause when I think about this team going forward. And last year it was obvious, like 2024, you're like, oh, everybody's hurt, including your star pass rusher. Like, once he gets back, everything will kind of fill itself out. Levi Onwuzurike didn't have the most productive sack season ever, but he had a ton of pressures. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who say that doesn't matter, but when you have a ton of pressures and you're rushing with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, those turn into sacks. When you're rushing with a guy like Ali McNeil, when he's at the top of his game, which he was not, not even that I don't think, he was not at the top of his game. When you're rushing with those guys and they're playing well, those pressures turn into sacks. And unfortunately for Levi, he was kind of had a breakout campaign in a situation where he didn't really have any help. And a lot of those pressures weren't turning into sacks. I kind of lost where I was going with this, but even like at the best, it was like that. Oh, I remember what I was saying. 2024, after that season's over, you're like, okay, well, once they get Aiden back, like everything will be different. They rushed the passer pretty well in a handful of games in 2024 when he was still healthy. And then we've talked about this. He had a 14 sack season, 14 and a half sacks, something like that. He never really felt like he took over games. And part of that is probably not having a ton of help, especially on early downs when Al-Quadin Muhammad was off the field. But I'm kind of like done projecting it. And as we go into next season, like I'm not going to believe it until I see it when it comes to this pass rush being productive, when it comes to this defense being productive. I mean, from top to bottom, it's been bad. That was another one of my takeaways was the cornerback play on Sunday night was phenomenal. And I know part of that is the pass rush, but I mean, Christian Gonzalez made a play earlier in that game on a deep throw to Rashid Shaheed that like prevented the Seahawks, honestly, from probably beating them by 40. Like if they hit that bomb to Shaheed right off the bat, I don't know what happens from there.
Maybe could have gotten uglier. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, from him to Witherspoon, not just in covers, but on the blitzes to, who's the Josh Jobe on Seattle. Like they were all having good games. And again, that's something that we've taken away from these last couple Super Bowls. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, they're part of the reason why the Eagles didn't blitz in that Super Bowl. The years the Chiefs have won, it's been L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. Oh my gosh, these guys played amazing. So again, for as good as you can feel about the Lions offense going forward, provided that they fix some of the things that plagued them last season, I still worry whether that defense is going to be able to put it all together no matter which personnel are out there, no matter which personnel is healthy.
And it's interesting, right? Because it's not like the Lions haven't invested resources in corner. Yeah. They spent whatever it was to get DJ Reed last year. What was it, about $15 million APY. And then they obviously invested a first rounder to Terrion and a second rounder into Ennis that same year. You've got nothing from Ennis, unfortunately.
And they traded for Carlton Davis, and they signed Amik Robertson there that same offseason.
Right. So like they've invested resources. It's just that the resources haven't quite panned out. And I think I've made this point on the podcast before. I'm almost to a point where I'm not quite done blaming the corners because, like, obviously I think Terrion could have played better over the last 2 years. DJ Reed could have played better last year. But at some point, like, you have 5 years of pretty much across the board subpar cornerback play, definitely in the first 3 years of the Campbell era. You had a good year from Carlton Davis in 2024, and then in 2025, none of your corners really played well, except Terrion before he got hurt.
And Rocky Scene.
And Rocky Scene, thank you. At some point, yes, no, like earned. But at some point, like, I feel like you have to like look at something else. Like if you've cycled through 10 to 12 corners there and only 2 of them have panned out, maybe there has to be a scheme adjustment.
And you've invested all different kinds of resources. Like the guard thing, it was like, well, yeah. Or in the center thing, it was like, well, yeah, they didn't draft anybody. Like they drafted guys, but they drafted them with like late day 3 picks and Mahogany and Wingo and like all those guys. And so when it didn't work out, you were like, yeah, like that kind of makes a little bit of sense, Sure. But the corners, to your point, like they have invested a lot. They've invested day 1 capital, day 2 capital. DJ Reed was the most expensive free agent they signed last offseason. Like take this seriously. And again, it's the time to pressure, because it doesn't matter how good your corners are. If like the quarterback is always going to be able to find somebody if he has all day to throw. And then it's it's just like it's the scheme. Like the stat that I can't remember how many games it was through last season, but it was like through 10 games or 2 months, whatever it was, where it was like they had the Lions cornerbacks had the lowest average separation allowed in the entire NFL, and they were just getting beat like crazy. And it was like, how does this make any sense? And it's because the pass rush is not getting home. So the second that receiver finds an ounce of daylight, he's open. Like they can hit him.
Right. And that stat, by the way, is from Next Gen Stats, which tracks like players, like it's like trackers in the uniforms. It's not they're not eyeballing like, oh, he looks 2 yards away. Like it is this person has a tracker on. How close is he?
Yeah. So that was my big takeaway. And I don't really think I needed to see the Super Bowl to have those feelings. Like this is something that you and I have pretty much talked about at length since the season ended, but I feel like it just keeps continuing to be reinforced. And you don't even need to be the best defense in the world. Just be passable. Like pull your weight. And this Lions defense has not pulled their weight. Again, extremely shorthanded in 2024. You can give them a pass for that. But in a gotta have it season, they were nowhere to be found for most of it.
To put a bow on the earlier point that I was making, it was the Lions and the 49ers were the only two teams to not have 3 or more players with 25 pressures, according to PFF. And that was a 49ers team that lost Bosa, that lost their first rounder, Micah Williams, and they were leaning on like Bryce Huff to rush the passer for all season long. And
they had no Fred Warner, who is not a pass rusher, but he changes everything that defense can do.
Right. So a severely depleted front in San Francisco and the Lions.
Yeah. Any big thoughts on the Super Bowl? I mean, I know we jotted down a couple things here, but I don't really have much more to say about that.
No, not really. Other than, I mean, it's cool if Kenneth Walker won. Like that's pretty sick.
Yeah. Shout out to Michigan State guy. Michigan State. Kenneth Walker is one of the more fascinating athletes I've covered in my time. I remember I covered the 2021 Michigan State game, and it was a top 10 matchup. I believe both teams were undefeated at that point. And he ends up running for, I think, 5 touchdowns. The moment of his college career. He almost goes on to win the Heisman. But I remember being in the press conference room after the game, and people were like, this is kind of an introduction to a lot of people, because he had played well when he first got there, but this was his breakout game, and people were asking those kinds of questions like, oh, who did you watch growing up? Like, who do you model your game after? And he's like, he didn't have any answers. And people were like, you don't watch football? Like, you didn't even watch football when you were a kid? He's like, no, not really. Like, I just play football. I don't really watch it. Like, I literally, he could not name a running back that he looked up to or wanted to model his game after. And I think those athletes are the most fascinating athletes in the world, because it's just like,
you're just
doing it. It's just like, yeah. Like, yeah, I see numbers, so I'm an accountant,
Right. Sean Alexander, the former Seahawks running back, he said something funny before the Super Bowl. He said that his whole career, he wanted to be a bigger version of Tony Dorsett, the Hall of Famer. And then he said, and then when I watch Kenneth Walker, I see a smaller version of myself. So I'm like, wait a minute, is Kenneth Walker just Tony Dorsett? And he laughed when he said it, but he was very complimentary of Walker. And now he enters. He's an unrestricted free agent for the first time in his career.
Yep.
At the peak of his career. Yeah, so he will probably be cashing in this offseason.
And it's an interesting conversation that's happening over in Seattle, and that was happening over in Seattle. Of they have this 2-man backfield. One guy clearly seems to be better than the other, but I think you can make the argument that them splitting the workload allowed Kenneth Walker to be fresh for this time of year and allowed him to be at his best when guys were running out of gas, especially in that Super Bowl. And that's exactly what happened with Jahmyr Gibbs last year when David Montgomery got hurt. So we've had discussions about, is the 2-man backfield still worthwhile for the Lions? And I think from a load management standpoint, I think we continue to have evidence that there is probably some credence to the idea that it does benefit the top back, even if it does take carries away from him in the meantime.
You and I have discussed this before, and I think for the most part we're in pretty lockstep. I know we've shifted a little bit with the whole Montgomery, excuse me, the Montgomery usage this past year, but I think me and you both kind of agree. Like in the biggest moments, I want Jahmyr Gibbs on the field, like kind of no matter what. Um, but I think we also both agree for the first 4 months of the season, I want Jahmyr, like I don't want any running back taking more than like 60% of the carries. Like
Yeah.
I like you said, you aren't fresh at the end of that season, and then even beyond beyond that, like it's just hits after hit after hit after hit after hit. Like that'll shorten a running back's career by like 3 seasons, 3 seasons. I want Jahmyr Gibbs to play for as long as possible. So that even beyond just the single season benefits, I think the career benefits of having two running backs makes sense.
Another thing I recognized on Sunday night is how much I don't think that they're all that similar of running backs, but how much Kenneth Walker and David Montgomery look alike on the field with their pads. They both have they're both like shorter guys, and they have like the shoulder pads that are basically like non-existent. And then they just have these like tree trunks for legs, and it looks funny out there for some reason. I don't really know how to explain it, but it just looks they look powerful when they're out there running.
Can you guess how many players in the NFL forced more missed tackles this season than Kenneth Walker?
Bijan?
Correct.
How many are there? Wait, can you tell me how many there are, and then I'll try to guess them?
End of list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
I'm
insane.
Just literally batting 100.
Yeah, no, but that's insane for Walker. And
but I'm more impressed with my own feet.
Yeah, no doubt.
You can continue.
No, I had nothing else. For the record, that's including the postseason run that he had.
I'm gonna go back real quick before I move off the Super Bowl and just look at our picks, see what we got right. I almost nailed the score prediction. I had 27-13. Game ended up being 29-13. Unfortunately, for me, I did, in the spirit of the Super Bowl and betting on everything, I did place an exact score bet for 27-13, and it was 100-1. It would have been pretty sick if it won, though. So MVP, I had Rashid Shaheed. You had Sam Darnold. Neither of us hit there. First touchdown, I had Cooper Kupp. You had Kenneth Walker. It ended up being AJ Barner. Anytime touchdown, I had Rashid Shaheed. You had AJ Barner. I think that was like 3 plus 350 or something like that. Yeah. So you're up a half unit after these first 3 bets. We both had heads in the coin toss, so that's pretty cool. We both had.
We had the Seahawks.
To cover
and the under hitting.
So great job. All right, before we get into some news, some notes, some banter, and some off-season burning questions, we are going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back, generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service. So you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
All right, segment 2 here at the Gridiron Gang podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, please press that subscribe button. And when you wake up on Thursday mornings, there will be a new episode of Gridiron Gang waiting in your podcast player for your drive to or from work. Before we get into some burning questions, got a couple news and notes and also some updated Super Bowl odds. We'll start there. This is via DraftKings. Lions are tied with the Packers for the 7th best odds to win the Super Bowl at 14-1 and tied with the Packers for the 4th best odds to win the NFC at plus 750. What do we think about that? Is that too high, too low? Is that right? Do you think they are on par with the Packers? Do you think they're better than the Packers? Do you think they're worse than the Packers? What are your thoughts?
I think it kind of feels right? Like a step above middle of the pack, but a step below the elite. Like I don't think the Seahawks are going anywhere. The Rams with Stafford coming back I think are still going to be a problem. But then from there, like you could convince me Packers, Bears, Lions, Vikings if they figure out the JJ situation, a bunch of teams, the rest of the NFC West. I think that the Lions are kind of in that class of above the middle of the pack, but below the top 2.
I think for as much as we were just talking about the problematic nature of the defense. I still am a believer in the offense, a believer that they will fix whatever problems plague them, particularly with the offensive line. And I'm still high on them. However, I will say the NFC is just a bloodbath every year, and I do feel like that's going to be a problem for the Lions going forward. And it's kind of like, what would you rather have? Would you rather be in the conference with like the super quarterbacks and average teams, or would you rather be in the conference with average quarterbacks and the super teams? I don't really know the answer to that, because if Mahomes goes 4 out of 5 years, like, that's difficult. But if in the NFC it wasn't this year, well, I guess never mind. Ignore the point I was about to make. But it's just a gauntlet every year in that conference.
I think the NFC is definitely deeper, and I say that with the understanding that, like, the Patriots now are like an issue in the AFC. The Broncos have not come out of nowhere, but are perhaps in that class now. But I think I'd still rather be in the NFC, just because, like you said, we have, like, before this year. This year felt like such an anomaly, and like, wow, look at this parity, because it wasn't an anomaly. Like, usually it is Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson in the AFC title game, or Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen. Like, it's been rare that it's not that, and it was refreshing this year that it was, but I would still prefer to not have to face those guys until the Super Bowl.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you. This felt like the most parity-driven NFL season that I've watched in a long time, and I don't think that contributed to the season that the Lions had. But I mean, you talk about how, like, it's very rare that we have like a complete changing of the guard in so many respects across the league, including the current dynasty of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was fun. I had fun watching it throughout the year.
All right, let's get into some news here for the Detroit Lions. We got a promotion notice. Steve Oliver, previously the assistant O-line coach, has been promoted to the tight ends coach. He has spent 5 seasons in Detroit, including the last 3 as the assistant O-line coach, so nice little promotion for him. He takes over a room left behind by Tyler Rule, who is going to call plays for the Iowa State Cyclones as their new offensive coordinator in 2026. Dan Skipper, Lions legend, Lions cult hero, is back in a coaching role. That's to be determined. What we will say is that the assistant O-line coach job, as we just said, is open because Steve Oliver got promoted. So that would be like, it would make sense logistically and all that stuff for him to just kind of slide right in there. But also, this is his first foray into coaching. And who knows if they'll just slide him right in there. So I'm curious to see if he's just like, offensive analyst or whatever it is, quality control. I'm curious if he starts there, if he just slides right into the assistant O-line coach, because it sounds like that was a big part of his job. Like, I know we talked to him after the Minnesota game, and he was talking about like how it was on him to help like get some of the younger guys right, and those sorts of things. So it sounds like he's been doing a little bit of that already, and it's a quick transition into coaching. I think he retired on January 18th or something like that. So I think it's been like less than 3 weeks.
And then January 19th, he was at the East West Shrine Bowl in Texas.
Yes, Frisco, Texas. Fun fact, that is the same city where when he was out of work during 2018, his wife's family owns a pie shop in Frisco, Texas. And he went to go work at the pie shop through the holidays because he didn't have an NFL job. So the fact that he began his coaching career there is kind of cool. A little full circle moment for old Skip. The assistant tight ends coach, Seth Ryan, left to be the passing game coordinator for Aaron Glenn and the New York Jets, a guy who has been kind of under the radar, but obviously maybe a little bit more prominent as far as these assistant coaches go, because his father is Rex Ryan, his grandfather is Buddy Ryan, but somebody who I think was somebody who we kind of respected a lot because we had heard from Ben Johnson all these things that he'd been doing. Like, I think he credited Seth Ryan with like being a big contributor to the trick plays that they would run in 2024 and stuff like that. So an up and coming coach with some good what do we call pedigree, I guess you could say.
And Roll sang his praises on the way out as well.
Yeah. So he's going to New York to be the passing game coordinator.
That made a little bit more sense because I don't know about you. Like I said, like we've heard such good things about him. I was a little bit confused when word came down that it wasn't him that was getting the tight ends coach bump. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then once it it came out that he was going to be the pass game coordinator for the Jets. I was like, that makes more sense why that shook out how it did.
Yeah, that feels like a promotion. That's a step between position coach and coordinator, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. I will say that troubling to go work in New York, but it definitely I think is closer to a coordinator than a position coach.
Definitely taking a gamble. However, I will say, well, maybe not as a passing game coordinator. I was going to say, if you were still an assistant tight ends coach, you can kind of like, you're like a little bit like a cockroach where like they can nuke the place and then you're like, do I still work here? They're
Right.
Like, yeah. You know what? Get in there. We don't want to hire a new assistant tight ends coach.
Right.
So yeah, that is the news there. And then last bit of news that we have today, sad news. Rest in peace, Tracy Scroggins, Lions number 3 sack leader. I know you talked to Robert Porcher, another Lions legend, about Tracy.
Yeah, they were drafted the same year in 1992. They spent 10 seasons together. They met at the Shrine Bowl. We just mentioned the Shrine Bowl earlier. They met there in 1992. They were 27 draft picks apart. Like I said, 10 years together in Detroit. They were roommates during training camp. Super close, and just Prochet described him as having a wealth of wisdom, basically. And he said that Scroggins, along with another member of that 92 class, Prochet said that he promised Scroggins' mom and dad and the other players' mom and dad, an offensive lineman who was drafted later. I should probably get his name instead of just calling him Larry Tharp. He said that he promised the parents of those two that he would like look after their sons and take care of them. He called them his oldest sons, and he joked. He said sometimes they weren't the best because they didn't listen to what I said, but for the most part, they were pretty good. He told a couple funny stories about how just always competitive. He said he remembers one time they were playing Tampa in Detroit, and they were playing the Bucs in Detroit, and he said they had a half sack. They both met at the quarterback, and he said before they even like got up off the ground, Tracy was like, "I'm not sharing that with you," which is like we've seen like Hutch say like jokingly to Muhammad this past year. But yeah, his family believes, and obviously there's no way to know for sure yet if you had CTE until you pass away and then they study your brain. His family believes that he had CTE. He sued the NFL in 2016 because he says he received a preliminary diagnosis of CTE, and that in the 90s the NFL was hiding the connection between head trauma and long-term effects. So he was part of that, and he said in that 2016 suit, him and his lawyer alleged he had memory loss, had bouts of anger, things like that. The classic examples of the classic symptoms of CTE. So we don't know the cause of death or the situation surrounding it, but I know his family did put out a statement, and they said for years Tracy had struggled with CTE. So it's definitely sad, and it's a shame.
Extremely sad story, and he probably is a little bit underappreciated, like in Lions lore. 3rd all time in sacks. That is no small feat. So rest in peace, Tracy, and thanks for telling us about that conversation.
It's insane, and not to talk about football in light of his passing, but I did think about this. The Lions, they hadn't won a playoff game prior to winning the first one recently. What was it, 92, if I recall correctly?
I think 91.
91.
91 or 92. I think it was 91 season
90s.
In January 1992.
Right, thank you. But it is insane. Like, they had such individual talent at certain positions. Like, you had Porcher, you had Scroggins, both of them rushing the passer, 1st and 3rd in Lions history in sacks. They combined for 156 sacks in the 10 years that they played together. Yeah, those two guys rushing the passer. You had Barry Sanders running the ball on the other side, and
they had the most productive receiving trio in NFL history.
Right, and they certainly had seasons. Like, they made the playoffs, I think, in 5 of the 10 years that Tracy was on the team, finished above 500 5 of the 10 years. So they had success, but it was like, man, like they have these individuals that are so good and in some cases great. And it's like, man, I wonder why they couldn't quite put it together in that decade.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some off-season burning questions to close out the show. Well, we have 2 more segments left. We got burning questions, and then we got keep 4, cut 4 to
my
close
turn.
Things out, where Richard will try to get me, but it won't happen. Simply won't happen. All right. Coming up, We have the NFL Combine. You mentioned that. We have that is from the 23rd, I believe, to the 29th. And then the legal tampering period begins March 9th, and then free agents can sign March 11th. The draft is April 23rd. So that's kind of what's coming up. But as far as the big picture questions that the Lions will have to solve, I think it starts with center. And you could argue it starts with left tackle because that's the number 2 burning question on our list here, is that Taylor Decker is, considering retirement. And I would even wager to say it sounds like he is more on the side of retirement than not when we last talked to him at the end of the season. But I think fixing the center position is priority number 1 for this team this offseason. And I think after having conversations with you, after digging into some things on the internet, I think it's going to be easier said than done. I think this is going to be they're the 4 different pools that they could solve this center position are all going to be tough to swing. Like, they don't have really many in-house options. They have Tate Ratledge, who could move to center in theory, but he only did it for 3 days in training camp last offseason before they pulled the plug, and it sounds like he doesn't want to go to center. The draft, they have limited draft capital because they traded 2 third-round picks for Isaac Tisslaw, so they only have 2 picks before day 2, and I don't really feel like going out and getting a 5th-round center is something that quote-unquote fixes the center position. Even if it might ultimately end up fixing it, I don't think it is a move to fix it immediately. And then in free agency, you've got 3 guys who are kind of at the top of these free agent rankings in Tyler Linderbaum from the Ravens, Connor McGovern from the Bills, and Cade Mays from the Panthers. All of those guys are going to get at least $12 million. And in the case of McGovern and Linderbaum, probably somewhere between 16 and 20 million, with Linderbaum pushing that upper limit. Who knows? He might go past 20 million. But anybody below that is not really that much of an upgrade. And so, and it's just like, as you look at all these options for, okay, how can they, what's the ideal scenario for them? I think it's hard to envision one, because all of these avenues of acquiring the player that you're looking for come like loaded with problems. And
Right.
and the trade market is also like completely like, because that's how this all came up, is you and I were texting and we were like, they might have to swing a trade to fix the center problem, but nobody wants to trade their center because it's such an important position. And even if you're, good teams don't want to lose their center because they're trying to win, and that's an important position. And bad teams don't want to give up their center because they need to turn things around quickly, and that's a hard thing to solve. And if regardless of if you have a young quarterback or have a quarterback who you're trying to make it work, like you have to set them up for success, or the entire team's not going to have success, and you're going to get fired. So offensive linemen just very rarely become available via trade. And I think like what I learned going through this is that center is probably a lot harder to find through any one of those avenues than even like a tackle.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason why, when me and you were having the conversation about like, I wonder if the trade market will be an option for them, is because I think a lot more teams kind of need a center. And like, you go into it, you go into free agency and you're like, all right, we're going to get one of those 3 guys. But then you start thinking about it. It's like, okay, we think we're going to get one of those 3 guys. The Vikings think they're going to get one of those 3 guys. If Linderbaum leaves Baltimore, the Ravens are probably going to think that they want one of those 3 guys. And then it's not going to be Linderbaum. So now it's one of 2. And I just think the musical chairs gets played, and it's all, you hope you have one of those top 3. The trade market is interesting to me. I think there's options there like Jackson Powers-Johnson, John Michael Schmitz, but like you said, I think those are upgrades. But how much, and is it worth moving off a 3rd-round pick for it, or whatever it'll take to get it? I say a 3rd-rounder because that's what it took to get Carlton Davis. I will say that in free agency, and we could discuss this in a little bit when we talk about like, is it time to restructure some contracts and make money happen? I think if it's not going to be a trade candidate, they have to be willing to spend. And I think this is because the way I view center is kind of like almost like a force multiplier, like for your quarterback, for the guys next to him, for the rest of the offensive line. Like, he makes everyone else good, and he could also make everyone else worse. And I think that, like, you got to figure that spot out this offseason. So if it requires forking over $15 million and there isn't a trade option available, a definitive upgrade, I think that is the one position where I'm most willing to spend money this offseason.
For sure. But even like the guys that we just mentioned, like the John Michael Schmitz, Jackson Bowers Johnson, those aren't clear upgrades. They're just younger than Graham Glasgow.
Mhm.
So like in theory, they could eventually be better. But as far as what they've been to their first 2-3 years in the league, it's been pretty much the same as to the output that the Lions were getting from Glasgow last season. So that's the problem. There's a lot of ways that you can quote unquote address it and give yourself a chance to fix it. But as far as like a slam dunk, I don't really know if many exist outside of signing Linderbaum, and that's a price that's going to be tough to cough up because I mean, you let Kevin Zeitler walk over a few $1 million, and we'll never know how much that was, because of him wanting to be in Tennessee or whatever it is, but it sounds like he's willing to move on from Tennessee. So after just one season, so clearly moving there for his wife's family or whatever the story was at the time couldn't have been that big a priority if he's already looking to move on and pack him up again. So I don't know. It's just there's very few slam dunk. Now, one thing I will say, maybe you go one of the avenues we haven't talked about. Maybe you really, really, really think that Tate can be a center. Like you've seen enough. You heard him in the meeting rooms. He sounds smart enough. He's got the physical, like the physical traits, all that stuff. Maybe you can go out and add a high
Kevin Zeitler.
Yeah, maybe go out and add Kevin Zeitler.
Yeah,
and then you feel probably a little bit better about moving Tate Ratledge over to center and having him figured out because on that right side of the line is fortified by Penei Sewell and Kevin Zeitler. So
right.
That's another option too.
100%. And I think the only issue that I have with that is not that like Tate has never said like I don't want to do it. Like he has always been like
it's clear what he.
He's always been like team player. Like I'm gonna do what's asked and I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability. But I think reading between the lines, he very much would prefer to stay at right guard. It's what he played in college for all of 5 of his seasons.
Never played center before.
Yeah, never played center before. And like you said, that they pulled the plug on that rather quickly in training camp. And it wasn't like I remember when it was the first 3 days Tate being there, and then they changed it. And I remember I was thinking like, oh, maybe they're just trying it out, like 3 days of this, 3 days of that, and then maybe we'll go back to this and see how it fits. They never went back to Tate at center. It was Graham center, Tate right guard for the rest of camp. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't recall a single time after the third day, so fourth day and beyond, that I saw Tate snap a ball. Like he wasn't even like repping.
He didn't even like sub in, like like Graham's out for a couple plays, like get in at center, we'll backfill right guard. No, it was all just Kingsley, get in there.
Yes, correct. So I think ideally you keep him at right guard, but like you said, I don't know the difference in Kevin Zeitler versus the center answer. Maybe in the aggregate, you just get your 5 best guys out there on the field, but it is definitely the top question that I have this offseason.
And that's why I think it's kind of feasible to see this happening, because for as much like it's one of those things where fans probably oversell how easy it is to just like switch positions as an offensive lineman. But I also think that is a pretty common train of thought is let's just get our five best offensive linemen on the field and move them around how we see fit. However, whatever makes the sum or the line greater than the sum of its parts, that's the combination that we're going to go with. And the Lions have always been that team, obviously, with the way that they move Graham around. Like they're not afraid to piss off somebody who doesn't want to play where they're playing. So that is one thing that makes me think it could be a possibility.
I will say, and this will be the last thing on the center, at least for me, I don't know about you, that I almost feel that way most for like guards and tackles, where again, like I don't think it's easy to switch from left to right or from right to left, but like I'm like, you're supremely talented. Like I trust that you're going to figure it out. I think center, the mental game, either you got it or you don't. And I'm not saying Tate does or does not. We don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah. But in my brain, that's how, like, I think if you've played guard a long time and you just don't got it at center, like you just, the calling the protections and speaking with the quarterback, if that's just not your forte, that's not your forte. That's fine. But I think shoving a guy into that spot is not the ideal way to go.
And I also think probably not that those 3 days of practice probably not like the best showing from Tate Ratledge for obvious reasons. Like he's in his very first NFL training camp playing a position he's never played before with the mental weight of being like, oh no,
Yeah.
they're all looking at me to replace Frank Ragnow. So that couldn't have been easy. And so we don't know what happened in those 3 days. I don't know if we ever will know what happened in those 3 days, but yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. Next up on the burning questions, what is Taylor Decker's future in Detroit? We kind of just discussed this and the ramifications of it for the offensive line, so we can kind of skip through it a little bit, but it does complicate things a little bit. Maybe it doesn't change their approach in round one. You know, I don't think it probably changes their approach at all because you know that Taylor Decker could still retire the season after. So if you like a tackle, just take the tackle and you'll figure it out whether Decker retires or not. But I also think that they don't really like to be shoehorned into having to make a selection like that. And I keep going back and forth with it because Brad Holmes always said, oh, we don't draft for need, don't draft for need. What's the biggest need the last couple of seasons? Edge rusher. What is he not doing? Drafting an edge rusher. But at the same time, he did go out and draft 2 corners when they really needed a cornerback overhaul. He did go out and he immediately added Tate Ratledge and Miles Frazier and then said after the draft, yeah, we wanted to get younger at guard, which tells us that they were at least
targeted that
scouting that position a little bit extra. So we'll see what happens. I still think that if all else goes according to plan, and they're not going, there's no real like center prospects who they would take at 17. So I don't really know if Taylor Decker's retirement changes anything about their approach to the offseason, but it does change, perhaps, depending on the quality of this hypothetical replacement, the outlook for the Lions 2026 season.
I will say that it's a lot easier to get worse at tackle than it is to get better, right? Like, I think people can look at Taylor Decker and, he's older, the shoulder's bothering him. He would have these plays from time to time where he got beat and he'd give up a sack or something like that. But I think going into the wilderness at left tackle is a little scary. However, with that said, if you can find a player at 17 to fill into that spot, Decker retiring would clear a little bit of money. It's not a ton, but it would clear a little bit of money that perhaps could be invested into center that you wouldn't have had Taylor been on the roster. But again, with that said, you're taking a risk that a 23-year-old never played in the NFL before, 17th overall pick, can be as good or at least close to Taylor Decker, and that's scary. Like, it could blow up. If he's no good, then season's not over, but you're at a severe disadvantage.
Yeah. Moving on here, how will cap constraints impact the Lions' approach to the 2026 offseason? Now, there's a few things that are covering under this bullet point. One being, what will the cap restructures look like? I think we all expect there to be some contract restructuring this offseason, particularly with Jared Goff and then potentially with Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown. We'll start there because you published something on the Detroit News today. If you are a person who has trouble understanding the salary cap and the idea that it is in fact real, go check out Richard's piece because he did a very good job breaking it down. But verbally, what can you tell us about contract restructuring, Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and what the Lions could be looking at in terms of cap savings by restructuring their deals this offseason?
So I think if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, I would suggest just reading it, right? Like, I think if I were to talk about it here, we would talk for like another hour, like trying to like, all right, and you do this with this money and then this million, but the base salary is this, da da da. The nuts and bolts of it, as the Lions are concerned in 2026, is I think there's 4. I don't even want to say obvious candidates because 3 of the 4 or however many of them could not be restructured. But I think there's 4 potential candidates that could be restructured for the Lions this offseason. It's players, obviously, with high base salaries. They're under contract for the foreseeable future, and they're not likely to be cut because you don't want to cut a guy that you restructure. I think 4 guys fit that description: Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aleem McNeil. I think probably in that order is the likelihood of restructuring, and Goff, Sewell, St. Brown, McNeil. But again, we don't know that for certain. With that said, if they restructured the maximum amount for every guy, it would equal to about $93 million in created cap space this offseason. But again, like, that's just shifting money ahead towards the future. Like, doing that would be drastic. Like, I don't expect that to happen, but it would allow you to sign excuse me, to splurge in March next month, but it would limit you in 27 and beyond for not only signing your impact players, like re-signing and extending those guys, which we've talked about before, but also just like adding like a DJ Reed caliber player in future free agencies. The maximum savings for Jared Goff, and these are all rough estimates, not down to the dollar amount, for Jared Goff is about $40 million. Penei Sewell is about $15 million. Amon-Ra St. Brown is about $21 million, and Aleem McNeil is about $17 million. The Lions, according to Over the Cap, are currently on pace to be $8.5 million over the cap. So by the time the new league year starts in March, I think it's March 11th, so exactly 1 month from today,
Which
they will have to. What was
it's
it?
fairly normal. It's fairly normal.
There's 11 teams that are currently in that same boat, and about half of those teams have more cap, more over the cap, more than
a higher negative balance.
Yeah, thank you. So the Lions have to clear at least $8.5 million to be even, but then they need more money to re-sign guys, to sign guys from outside the building, and to sign their own draft class. So it depends how aggressive you want to be in free agency. Do you need $30 million and you can afford everything? Do you need $50 million? You need 60. I think given Brad Holmes's just his constant eye for the future while simultaneously building for the present, I'd expect it to be on the lower end. But again, like if there's a center out there and they believe that's the guy that they need, I think the biggest takeaway is they can make it happen. It just will be with future consequence.
So that is real quick before we move past that a little bit. I think can you give the people a quick let's say I came up to you and I said the salary cap is not real, right? And I think that's a common sentiment within NFL fans because you can just snap your fingers and have more cap space today than you did when you woke up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain how that is not the case, but how it can seem that that's the case?
So I think Jared Goff, for example, I'll use his contract. So Jared is under contract for 26, 27, 28. And then he has a void year in 2029, which is just, he's not under contract to play for the Lions in 2029. It's just an extra year at the back end of a deal that lets you, if you're prorating a signing bonus, it lets you like smooth it out, spread it out over a longer stretch. So if we use Jared as an example, Jared in 2026, his total cap hit is $69.6 million. I think that's fifth in the league. I think it's safe to assume the Lions are not going to carry that cap hit into this offseason. So how do they lower it? You look at his base salary. It's $55 million. Tops the Lions. Jared, because of his service time, he spent 10 years in the league. His minimum base salary has to be at least $1.3 million. So if the Lions did a maximum restructure, they would take 55 minus 1.3. It gives us $53.7 million. And he has 4 years left on his deal, 6, 7, 8, and then 9, the void. That $53.7 million would then be spread out evenly over the final 4 years of the deal. That's $13.4 million added to each year. And you can't change that. Like that salary can now no longer be restructured. And Jared already has every year $14.6 million in an already existing signing bonus from the beginning of his contract. So if they were to restructure Jared right now, that would mean 14.6 to the full extent, like I just described, in 6, 7, 8, and 9, 2026, 7, 8, and 9. They would have 14.6 plus 13.4 million, which is 28 million, tied up to Jared in each of those years. That's not going anywhere, no matter what. And again, that includes a 2029 year that he's not playing for you. It's a void year. So you're adding money to the future that you can never get off of, and you can't kick this can down the road anymore.
I was going to say, I think that's just the main point that we want to give people is that the money never disappears. It just goes to another year where you think the salary cap's going to keep going up. And then 1 year, a lot of times you're like when you're in a situation like this, or, like the Bills were a couple years ago when they started getting older, and it's like, all right, you kind of just got to bite the bullet, like have 1 year where you're just like drowning in this debt and you let it all kind of smash in 1 year. And you're like, okay, well, this year is going to suck. But after this, we're going to have a clean slate.
Right.
And it basically is just that money will never go anywhere. It just gets dispersed to a different year. And then if you don't use up all that cap space, like let's say they save $50 million by restructuring Goff, nice clean number, and then they end up going into the season after only spending $5 million of it, that extra $45 million rolls over to 2026 in cap space. So everything from the cap space to the cap hits to all of that stuff is just going into the future. And really, if you think the salary cap is going to keep going up and you're looking at these huge TV rights deals and CBA negotiations at the end of the decade and think, okay, well, the cap's been going up. I think the cap is like jumped by more than expected for like the last, basically since COVID ramifications stopped. And so you're thinking to yourself, okay, like if we can just get to 2030, right? And all these contracts that look like a big deal in 2026 and 2027 and 2028, they might not be a big deal by 2030 because they're going to get to negotiate I think this might be 2031. They're going to get to renegotiate the TV rights deal, and they're also going to get to renegotiate the CBA. So every time that happens, it seems to have a massively positive impact on the salary cap. And if you are projecting that to happen, then you can kind of be like, yeah, we'll just take our medicine in 2031 when teams maybe are being a little bit cautious, but by 2031, that might not even be a big deal to have those, numbers on the books. And again, that seems like a long ways away, but when you're thinking about deals that start in 2027 and have void years, it's already in the future more than you think, if that makes sense. I don't think that sentence made a lot of sense, but I tried my best.
I will say also that, like, if there's a guy that you feel confident that's going to reach a next contract with you and that you're going to extend him, that you should feel more comfortable restructuring him, because then that changes the math. Like after the restructure, if you extend him and add more years to the deal, now you can like smooth it out over even more years. I think Penei, that's why I said Penei Sewell's probably like second most likely to, if the Lions need more cap space. Penei Sewell's what, 25? Like that guy's getting another contract, like barring anything unforeseen. It's insane how young Penei came into the league, because he finished his rookie year, got extended, he'll get extended again, and if Father Time treats him well, he might get 3 extensions in the NFL, which is like insane.
He might get 4. Trent Williams is still playing at like 38 years old.
True.
How old's Lane Johnson?
He's 34, if I had to bet. Are you Googling it?
34? That's 10 seasons away from Penei.
Yeah, which is insane.
After already playing 5.
Yeah, at 5 at a Hall of Fame level.
3 first-team All-Pros. Crazy. All right, we said we weren't going to get in the weeds, and then I think we got lost in the weeds a little bit there. Next burning question, and this falls in line with the cap constraints. We can kind of put these into 2 separate categories, one being a negative, one being a positive. With these big contracts coming up, they have 4 contract-eligible players or extension-eligible players from the 2023 class starting this offseason. All those guys need to get paid. Is this the offseason where cap constraints force the Lions to make some tough decisions on maybe some beloved players? And there aren't really too many options this year already. Alex Anzalone is the one guy who the Lions would probably love to have him back, but
a definitive
he hasn't really gotten paid. But a definitive starter. Or could they swing a trade, have to move it? And these are things that I'm interested in, because we only really think of it from the player acquisition side, and maybe that's just because they are a contending team right now, but contenders ultimately end up having to trade a lot of guys too, because they're usually spending a lot of money on those
the Chiefs
teams.
Got rid of Joe Tooney, who just won the best.
Chiefs got rid of Tyreek Hill.
Yeah,
at the peak of his powers,
the best wide receiver in the NFL, and if you go off who won the award this week, the best offensive lineman in the NFL this year. Yeah.
And so is this the offseason where that happens? I think it's a little hard to predict, perhaps. But I think maybe we're still a year away on that front. But it is something to consider.
I would agree, because even like some of these class of 2023 extensions that get handed out, they won't kick in for a couple of years, right? Because the 5th-year options will probably be built into them for Campbell and Gibbs. And then you still have a 4th year for Branch and Laporta. So it's probably like a couple years down the road where the massive cap number is gonna bite you. But I mean, it's certainly tight. Like it's tighter than it's ever been, I'd say.
Yeah. Along with that, now that they have kind of realized, oh, we can't just go from season to season and just contend because we have a lot of really good players. Is this the season where they do restructure some things and then they go back? Maybe we do make that big trade finally. Maybe we do trade for Max Crosby. I don't think that's going to happen. I hate to even like say the name because I don't want to get people like riled up or anything. But is that an outcome where they go, oh wow, we're so worried about winning tomorrow that we forgot to win today. Let's focus on winning today and make a move like that. I don't think it's. I mean, again, that's specific situation with Max Crosby, the cap hit he carries, all that stuff. I think it's going to be tough to swing, but I could also see them taking a big swing this year after how last year finished.
I think even a swing could be beyond like acquiring a Pro Bowl / All Pro level player in like a Crosby or a Hendrickson who's hitting unrestricted free agency. Who I think if you are no matter what, we're walking out of this offseason with another elite edge to pair with Hutch. I think like if the hip checks out for Hendrickson, like that's kind of a home run because you don't have to pay any draft capital to get him like you would with Crosby. Besides the point, what I was trying to say was I think you could even see a risk taken in like the types of players that they acquire. And we've talked about this before, like specifically with Anzalone as a free agent, with Amik Robertson as a free agent. We talked about what can be learned from the Super Bowl. Nicky Manwari is a big slot, like a big guy that can both defend the run and defend the pass, and you feel good about him doing it. We've talked about like the value of those players and whatnot, but having that guy, why do the Rams use so much 13 personnel? They want to dictate what defense you're going to have on the field. Like, oh, we're going to make you be in base or things like that. Well, if I have a guy like Manwari that can do both, like now I'm running whatever I want. Like if I want Manwari on the field to defend the run, he'll do it. Can you get a guy like that? Or this is a little complicated because Branch is injured. Can you move Branch into that role when he gets healthy and get another safety? Maybe it's Thomas Harper. Maybe Thomas Harper and Curry Joseph are your safeties for the next few years. Or it's just, I think, a schematic change, which kind of goes back to the top of the show when we were talking about like the corners maybe not playing as well. I think there is an opportunity this offseason with Anzalone as a free agent, with Amik Robertson as a free agent, specifically Amik, if you want to get a big player in that spot.
Like a Fatu Malfanu, for example.
Yeah, kind of.
That is the last burning question that we have here. How do they reinvent the defense scheme and personnel wise to make it a plus unit in 2026? What's interesting though is, I mean, yes, the way that they've handled like their base and nickel defense by having either Derek Barnes or Amik Robertson on the field, that makes it tough to dictate the terms. However, we kind of felt like going into these Rams and Steelers games against these teams who play with 3 tight ends on the field, they were well equipped to handle them because they do play so much base defense with Derek Barnes on the field.
Sure.
And so that's interesting too, because I do feel like, every year you're kind of reacting to what happened the previous year, but you're also like, you have to figure out what's coming. And I feel like that's kind of the new thing right now is everybody wants to be the Seahawks defense with that, that big nickel and, can play against anybody, but everybody wants to be the Rams offense where they have 3 tight ends and they can dictate the terms. So I think that's an interesting thing that's going on right now. And that's one of my favorite things about the NFL is there's just always like this offense ahead, now defense ahead. And there's just like a never ending cycle of innovation. And I'm curious to see how the Lions handle that because they need to innovate, but they also kind of need to catch up in a lot of respects.
I will say as well that I would be concerned. Let's say Anzalone walks, but they're still, they really want to live in base like they've done in recent years, where they run 3 linebackers more than almost anyone, maybe more than anyone in the NFL. I think there's a few players that allow you to do that. And I think Dan Campbell kind of talked about this earlier this season. I remember he mentioned Branch, Anzalone, and one other person that I can't remember off the top of my head. It might have been Barnes. That allows them to play defense the way that they like to play defense. And in Anzalone specifically, he is such a good coverage linebacker that you feel okay having 3 linebackers on the field because it's like, okay, like this guy can cover even the best tight ends. Like this guy can cover Brock Bowers or whoever is out there. Versus if he leaves, anybody that you put in that spot, barring a few, probably you're not going to get these guys exceptions are not going to be as good in pass coverage as Anzalone. So now if you're going to remain in base as much as you are and you get worse in pass defense, now I'm even more concerned. But we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that is for all the person. Like I think there's a lot of interesting personnel stuff to talk about on the defensive side of the ball too. But from the safety position to not only are you looking for potentially like a big slot cornerback, you're also maybe looking to like get a new safety in there. I don't know what the fact that Branch and Joseph, if only one of them had a serious injury, I wouldn't even be thinking it, or I would be thinking about it, but I wouldn't be like hell bent on like they need to go out and get somebody. But the fact that they're both injured, like that makes me nervous. On the other hand, Thomas Harper just stepped right in, plus player, 12th overall PFF grade out of all safeties. So maybe they're fine. I don't know, but I just think that like the scheme stuff with the defense is so infuriating that it's hard to even discuss those like personnel things that they could do because they're like, well, none of it's going to matter if they just keep doing what they're doing.
Right, which is what makes what in 1 month's time when the new league year starts and these contracts become official, what makes it so exciting.
Yeah. All right. Let us finish today's episode with Keep 4, Cut 4. Rich is going to present a topic. He's going to give me 8 names or things or nouns.
It'll be names this time.
It'll be names. And then I have to, on the fly, decide if I'm going to keep them or cut them. I have to keep and cut 4 apiece. What's today's topic, Rich?
Today's topic, because the Seahawks just won the Super Bowl, all-time Seahawks.
Man, okay.
I will say that I gave you 8 good guys. All right. None of these guys are not good.
Okay.
All right. Your first player, 2005 NFL MVP, mentioned him earlier in the show, Sean Alexander.
Keep. One of the first Madden cover athletes that I remember. And I remember when I was a kid, I hadn't heard of Sean Alexander when he was on the cover. And I want to say that was like 2003. I'm looking it up. It might have been like 07, honestly. It was 07. I was right.
07.
So I was probably 10 when that came out. And I remember being embarrassed that I didn't know who Sean Alexander was. And then I think he was the reigning league MVP. And
2005, he won it.
Okay. So, and then he retired not long after. And I was like, dang, I was just getting to know you, Sean Alexander. So, he retired after the 2008 season. Right, yeah. So 2 years after he's on the cover of Madden, he had that Peyton Hillis arc, but maybe a little better of a backstory. But I'm keeping Sean Alexander.
Keeping Sean Alexander. Your next player, one of the most feared safeties of the 21st century, Cam Chancellor.
Man.
It's tough.
I think I'm going to cut him just because I know we got some good Seahawks on the other side. But that's tough. That's
potentially
tough.
The hardest hitting safety.
The hardest hitting safety
of our generation.
In the league.
He put fear in the heart. I just have memories of Cam Chancellor just laying out Vernon Davis he got that one time. Ezekiel Elliott, where they kind of met in the hole and they just like stood each other up. He almost, when Jared Goff was with the Rams, he almost took Goff's head off, but instead Sherman came and lit Goff up as Goff was trying to run into the end zone on that famous hit.
Hilarious story.
What from Goff? Does Goff tell a funny story about it, or Sherman tells a funny story?
Sherman. He was saying that he's like, I'm going towards the sidelines, and I'm like, is this guy gonna get out of bounds? And he's not getting out of bounds, and I'm like, all right, I don't want to do this to you, but you leave me no choice, and just boom. I'm pretty sure he left the game after that and did not come back.
Yeah. But anyway, Cam Chancellor was a bad man, and he is cut. He's cut on your list. I'm gonna make you feel bad about every cut, no matter what. By the way.
No, I know, and I'm gonna be unaffected.
Your third player, we just mentioned him, Richard Sherman. One of the best corners of not only our generation, potentially all time, like top 15.
Didn't we? I feel like he was a topic a couple weeks ago, and I said he was like a zone corner, and you were like, I'm gonna keep him.
You cut him because he was a zone corner. Is what it was.
Well, yeah, we were just talking corners. You know?
Yeah, and you were like, you basically were like, I don't respect zone corners. And I was like, whoa.
I did not. I did not basically say that. Oh man, I'm gonna keep Richard Sherman. Not only was he like the face of that era, he was the face of the Legion of Boom, and also just those that NFC Championship game against the 49ers is one of the most memorable like games, moments of my lifetime when he got on that mic afterwards with Aaron Andrews on Fox and was talking about Michael Crabtree. It's an all-time NFL moment, all-time NFL guy. I'm going to keep him.
It was like that moment, like it was everywhere. Like my mom was seeing it on like Facebook memes. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was everything. It was that picture of him getting mad was like the old OKC Thunder meme that was like mom made
pizza rolls.
Yeah, it was that. It was like, you try me with a sorry blank like blank. That was the Sherman meme. So you're keeping Sean Alexander, Richard Sherman, you're cutting Cam Chancellor. So you have 2 keeps remaining with 5 more names coming.
Yep.
I'm going to give you multi-time All-Pro offensive tackle Walter Jones from the 90s into the early to mid 2000s. Who
I'm going to cut him because I don't really know him.
I was gonna try to help you. He's a 4-time All-Pro.
Don't care. Cut.
He might have the most All-Pros of any Seahawk of all time.
Don't care.
I was really, because I felt bad putting him, because I'm going to be honest, like my Walter Jones knowledge was not very good before I was putting.
You've never heard of him before that. Don't even pretend like you have. I've never heard of him either. It's okay to admit.
Which is why I was going to try to help you out. I was going to name some of his accolades, and you were like, "Don't care, cut
him."
I was going to try to help.
Don't care. Got a lot of legends on here. I don't got time for somebody I don't know.
I didn't know him either, but then I looked at his accolades. All right, you're at 2-2. Your next player is longtime Seahawk Tyler Lockett.
See, I want to keep Tyler Lockett. He's a bridge from the past. Tyler Lockett, very unfortunate, by the way. He was drafted by the Seahawks, and I'm sure everybody's heard this by now. Drafted by the Seahawks in 2015, 1 year after they won the Super Bowl, retired after the 2025 season. He didn't play for the Seahawks. He finished with 2 other teams. But he retired after 11 seasons, including 10 with the Seahawks, after the 2025 season. So he his NFL career was bookended by Seahawks Super Bowl victories that he was not a part of.
Which is so sad for him. Because
I don't know if bookended is the right word there, but
I think if he was part of them, it would have been bookended. It was bookended. Yeah. It was just 1 year from being bookended.
Yeah.
It's a shame because he was not only was he a good receiver, like I think there's like few people in the NFL that I know as like a resounding good guy. Like nobody has a bad word to say about Tyler Lockett, and he's like one of the few that I feel that way about. Like
who made the catch before the Russell Wilson interception? Was that Jermaine Kearse?
Correct, Jermaine Kearse. Yeah,
Kearse. Okay.
I don't know if it's Kearse or Kearse. I don't know.
Wait, we just established that he was. Oh wait, no. Yeah, he would have been on that 2015 team that played against the Patriots.
Yep.
In the Super Bowl. All right.
What are you doing? You keeping it cutting Tyler Lockett. Okay. It's understandable. Next up, still kicking, still playing, still winning awards. Got the Walter Payton Man of the Year, Bobby Wagner.
Bobby Wagner. Let me see here. I think he's one of the guys that has benefited from some unreal PR over the last couple of years. He was a second team All-Pro last year. Like that's not right? I feel like some of his like
I'm not saying
six-time first team All-Pro. Okay, what? I take it back, Bobby.
I'm not sure. I'm not gonna say whether or not because I don't know. Like I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know about the 4 best linebackers in the league. But I like how you were just like, come on,
that doesn't sound right. I feel like that's like kind of a big thing with it. Let me just go. This is a horrible way to research, kids. This is like a teacher telling their kids not to look things up on Wikipedia because it sets a bad example. I'm going to look up his PFF grade for last season and make a sweeping generalization that will just be out there forever on audio. Okay. He was pretty negative last year. He had 88.3. I'm sorry, Bobby Wagner. I'm going to keep you.
Even beyond just last year, he had 5 All-Pros
I was
first team All-Pros in a row.
Yeah, and then a 6 in 2014. I hear you.
You made the decision.
I just feel like that was like a big thing when he kept racking them up the Pro Bowls like in these last couple of years, it was like, all right, but really, But hey, the PFF, all hail the PFF grade.
So you have 3 keeps, 3 cuts with 2 players remaining.
Sorry,
Your second to last player is receiver Steve Largent.
I knew that one was coming. Wore the greatest uniform in Seahawks history. Back when they had the cool uniforms. Played 14 years in the league, Hall of Famer, 7-time Pro Bowl, 1-time All-Pro. I don't know if that moves it for me. First team All-Pro, as we've established, the standards here are pretty high. I really want to keep Steve Largent, and I feel like you're going to give me Russell Wilson on the back end here, and I don't know if I want to keep or cut him because when he was with the Seahawks, he was pretty good.
Tough decision.
Also, all-time bad weekend for Russell Wilson. Just everything that's happened since he left the Seattle Seahawks has just been the Seahawks winning and him losing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep Steve Largent because I think you're gonna give me Russ, and I'm gonna keep. He played it. Russell Wilson has played himself out of my keep for.
Well, it's not Russell Wilson. Your last name. It is Marshawn Lynch.
Keep.
Well, you can't keep. You got to cut him.
Oh, that changed my mind.
What?
You're a butthead, bro. You were totally good. If I kept Steve Largent, if I cut Steve Largent, you were gonna give me Russell Wilson, and if I kept Steve Largent, like I did, you were gonna give me Marshawn Lynch.
I'm gonna show.
Let's be real here.
For those watching the video recording,
I got
on
played.
YouTube or on the DetroitNews.com website at 12:50 p.m. You could see there. I texted. It's blurry, but I texted myself.
You can't see anything.
Those are the 8 names right there. That it's blurry.
That could
right
be
now.
anything.
Those are the 8 names that I texted myself. So you are keeping Steve Largent and you are cutting Marshawn Lynch as I'm writing that in for you. So, which by the way, I think is the right decision. Like, I think you should keep Steve Largent over Marshawn Lynch. Sure. So of these 8 names, you kept Sean Alexander, Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner, and Steve Largent. You cut Cam Chancellor, Walter Jones, Tyler Lockett, and Marshawn Lynch. I think Sherman.
I think I got it right.
I think Largent, Sherman, Wagner. It's tough. I think, but like I said, Walter, 4-time first team All Pro dog. Like at tackle, like that's you basically just cut the Seahawks Penei Sewell. Like,
yeah, doesn't do it for me. I don't even know what he looks like. You want me to keep him over a player that has sentimental value for me?
Well, on our little prep sheet, you deleted you were ashamed of your results here.
No. I just like moving things around.
I am trying to think genuinely what the right answer would have been.
You know what? I don't think there was a right answer.
You know what?
Whatever's in your heart.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm sorry, Bobby Wagner. All right. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Gridiron Gang podcast. We will be back next Thursday morning with a new episode waiting for you guys. When you wake up, be sure to press that subscribe button, and we will be here waiting for you in your podcast player, just trapped in there, screaming, play me, when you wake up in the morning and go to work. For Noel Bianchi and Richard Silva, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place.